When the notice landed in my mailbox, it was printed on heavy paper, like an invitation to a royal execution. Notice of violation and forced sale. The HOA logo sat at the top like it was proud of itself, embossed in navy blue ink. 3 wavy lines that were supposed to look like a lake, but honestly looked more like spaghetti. They gave me 72 hours to sell my property. Not fix it, not appeal, not even argue about it. Sell. 72 hours. I stared at the letter for a long time, half expecting a camera crew to pop out of the bushes yelling, "Gotcha!" But no, it was real. The HOA board, in their infinite suburban wisdom, had decided my small guest house, which I used to host visiting family, counted as a commercial rental structure. Never mind that it wasn't listed anywhere, never rented out, and the only guest staying there recently had been my brother-in-law, who spent most of his visit sleeping on the couch and eating all my pretzels. Apparently, they'd had a secret vote. Apparently, the president of the HOA, a guy named Richard Halloway, decided my property use was incompatible with the community covenant. That's HOA language for, "We don't like you and we're going to make it official." The clock started ticking. For 72 hours, my phone didn't stop buzzing. Real estate agents, nosy neighbors, and one guy from the HOA calling, as a courtesy, to let me know that if I moved quickly, they might be willing to take it off my hands before it went to a forced sale. Translation: they wanted to buy me out cheap. The lot wasn't fancy, but it was unique, one of only 2 lake-access properties left that weren't part of the HOA's direct holdings. My grandfather bought it in the 70s when the land was basically swamp. Now, thanks to the Lakeside Estates Beautification Project, it was surrounded by $600,000 homes with stone mailboxes and mandatory beige paint schemes. I'd refused to sell for years. Now, suddenly, the HOA decided I didn't have a choice. So, I did what any sane person would do. I called my lawyer, or more accurately, my friend Dana, who worked for a property development firm and loved a good fight. When I told her what happened, she laughed so hard she snorted. "They gave you 72 hours?" "Yup." "To sell?" "Uh-huh." She was silent for a long time. Then, "Do not do anything. Don't even sneeze near a for sale sign. I'm coming over." Dana showed up the next morning with a briefcase, a laptop, and a cup of coffee, large enough to serve a small army. We spread the papers across my kitchen table. The HOA's notice looked official, but the more she read, the wider her grin got. "These idiots didn't check the registry," she said finally. "What registry?" "The land registry. They think your house is on their subdivision plot." "It's not?" She shook her head. "Nope. You're technically not part of the HOA at all." I blinked. "Come again?" "Your grandfather's deed predates the establishment of the HOA by 4 years. The developer never annexed your lot into the association. You're outside their jurisdiction entirely." I stared at her. "So, they can't actually force me to sell?" "Oh, they can try, but legally, you could open a roller coaster in your backyard and they couldn't stop you." We both started laughing. Then she said something that made me stop mid-chuckle. "Actually, you might want to let them try." Dana's plan was simple and evil in the best way possible. If the HOA truly believed my land was under their control, and they were preparing to purchase it in their records, they'd have to file paperwork with the county to formalize it. And in doing so, they'd accidentally merge my land title with their communal property parcel. "Once that happens," she said, tapping her screen, "you can technically become a co-owner of the entire HOA's common property, the marina, the clubhouse, the parkland, everything." It sounded ridiculous. It was ridiculous, but she knew her stuff. "Let them file it," she said. "Don't argue, don't call them, don't threaten anything. Wait. Then, when the ink's dry, we'll file a corrective deed, and that's when you'll own them." I blinked. "Own them?" "Well, let us just say they all need your signature for a lot more than lawn violations." By the end of that week, the HOA filed the paperwork, bragging about their successful enforcement action in the community newsletter like they just won a trophy. Dana was watching the filings like a hawk. 2 days later, she called me at midnight. "It's done," she said. "They recorded it." I opened my laptop and looked at the registry she sent me. Sure enough, my little cabin lot now appeared as joint property with Lakeside Estates Association. Dana grinned through the video call. Congratulations, partner. You now own 1/38 of the HOA's land. I laughed. Wait, what does that mean practically? She leaned back in her chair, sipping her coffee like a villain in a legal thriller. It means they can do anything with their shared spaces without your consent, and that includes leasing the marina, maintaining the walking trails, or renewing the rental rights. I frowned. Rental rights? Yeah, she said, her eyes sparkling. They lease half the marina to a private company every year, for cheap. You're now a co-owner, which means they have to pay you your share, and because their own paperwork says you're the acquired parcel, they owe you the premium rate they charge non-members. I blinked again. You mean... Dana grinned wider. Yeah. They're about to pay you rent, triple rent. The first sign that the HOA realized something was wrong came in the form of an email titled Urgent, Clarification Needed on Property Lines. It was from Richard Halloway, the president himself, a man whose polo shirts probably had more starch than a bakery. He wrote, Dear Mr. Miller, we've encountered a minor technical issue with your recent sale paperwork. Please contact the HOA office to discuss a corrective action before this becomes unnecessarily complicated. Unnecessarily complicated. Translation. We've set our own house on fire, and we need you to help us put it out. I didn't reply. Dana told me to sit tight. The longer they panic, the better. By the following Monday, things had escalated. A letter arrived by courier, not mail, hand-delivered in an envelope so thick it could stop a bullet. Inside was a 3-page reversion agreement they wanted me to sign to restore administrative order. Dana nearly fell out of her chair laughing when she read it. This is priceless. They're admitting the error in writing. What happens if I don't sign? They can't operate their marina for starters. You're listed as a co-owner now. That lease renewal next month? They can't approve it without your consent. So they can't collect rent? She smiled. Nope. And the tenant's contract says if the HOA fails to provide access, they owe penalties, which means, I grinned, they'll be paying me rent. She raised her coffee mug. Triple, actually. Their own covenant calls for triple compensation when they fail to provide continuous access to joint property. You're technically the one providing access now. I couldn't help it. I laughed so hard my coffee spilled. 72 hours ago, they wanted me gone. Now they literally couldn't run their own lake without me. A few days later, I got my first visitor, Richard himself. He showed up on my porch wearing his usual khaki uniform and that HOA name tag like it was a badge of honor. Morning, I said, trying to sound casual. He forced a smile that looked like it hurt. Mr. Miller, I think we've had a bit of a misunderstanding. Oh, really? I said, sipping my coffee. About what? He gestured vaguely toward the lake. About boundaries, jurisdiction. It's all quite technical. Our legal counsel assures us this can be sorted out quickly if we all cooperate. By cooperate, you mean sign your paperwork? He hesitated. Well, yes, it's in everyone's best interest. I set my mug down. Richard, 3 days ago, your office told me I had 72 hours to sell my home or be forced out. Now you're asking for my signature. What changed? His smile tightened. We discovered a clerical oversight, a mapping error, nothing serious. Uh-huh. He stood there, sweating in the morning sun. Look, Mr. Miller, I understand you might be frustrated, but dragging this out isn't going to help either of us. I leaned against the railing. Oh, I don't know. It seems to be helping me just fine. He blinked. Excuse me? I smiled. Your marina tenant contacted me this morning. They can't get their lease renewed without my approval. They offered to pay their share directly to me if the HOA doesn't respond by Friday. For the first time, his confident expression cracked. You talked to the marina company? They talked to me, I said. Turns out they like dealing with owners who answer their phone. He stared at me for a long moment, his face turning the color of his tie. This isn't over, he said finally. No, I said, grinning. It's just getting started. Oh, Over the next week, word spread through the neighborhood faster than a rumor at a bake sale. Apparently, Richard and the board had quietly merged my property into the HOA's common parcel without consulting the members, which was a massive violation of their bylaws. Homeowners started calling emergency meetings, demanding explanations. Meanwhile, the marina's operator officially transferred their rental payments to my account per their contract's clause about recognized ownership. I woke up one morning to an email notification from my bank. Deposit received $11,200, triple rent, exactly as Dana predicted. By week 3, the HOA was in full-blown crisis mode. Richard sent out an all-caps community email. Please refrain from engaging with outside parties regarding HOA property. This matter is being handled internally. But the members weren't buying it. Half the residents showed up at the next board meeting demanding to know why their dues were being used to correct a mistake that wasn't mine. Dana and I watched the chaos unfold from the back row. Richard slammed his folder shut. We're working on a resolution, he said. One homeowner stood up, an older woman named Mrs. Hayworth who'd lived there since before the HOA even formed. A resolution? She said. You told us Mr. Miller was breaking the law. Turns out he owns part of our land. Maybe he should be president. The crowd laughed. Richard did not. After the meeting, Dana and I stood by the lake, the lights from the clubhouse reflecting off the water. So what now? I asked. She smiled. Now we make it official. File an access lease. Let them pay you for the privilege of using your own land. I raised an eyebrow. You can do that? Of course, they already owe you rent. You might as well make it permanent. 2 weeks later, the access agreement was recorded with the county clerk. In plain English, it said, the Lakeside Estates Homeowners Association acknowledges Mr. Miller's shared ownership and agrees to pay annual usage rent for continued operation of community assets, including the marina, dock, and shoreline facilities. In lawyer English, it said they were now my tenants. The next HOA newsletter came out that Friday. It was short, polite, and unintentionally hilarious. We are pleased to announce that a mutually beneficial arrangement has been reached with Mr. Miller regarding access to shared property. Normal operations will resume shortly. Dana sent me a text. Translation, you won. I texted back, they started this. I just finished it. She replied with a laughing emoji and one final line. Never mess with a man whose deed is older than your HOA. The next few months were blissfully quiet, which in HOA time is about as rare as a polite email. Every 30 days, a rent deposit hit my account like clockwork. Triple rate. Always on time. They called it usage compensation. I called it karma. Dana joked that I should start sending them holiday cards. Maybe a photo of you holding a thanks for paying my mortgage sign? I didn't, of course. I'm not that cruel. But I did start noticing something. The HOA wasn't handling the loss of power very gracefully. At first, they tried to pretend everything was normal. Board meetings were all routine maintenance updates and financial clarifications. But word had spread beyond our little community. Other homeowners associations in nearby towns had started whispering about the lakeside mess. Some even contacted Dana for consultations. Apparently, my situation had become a case study in how not to enforce property boundaries. The final straw came when Richard Holloway resigned. He didn't announce it publicly. The man simply vanished. One morning, there was an email from the HOA treasurer saying, effective immediately, Mr. Holloway has stepped down to pursue personal projects. By personal projects, they probably meant damage control. That same afternoon, I got a visit from the new interim president, Linda Carver. Linda was polite, well-dressed, and clearly chosen because she could smile while her world burned. Mr. Miller, she said warmly when I opened the door, I think it's time we reset our relationship. Reset? I said. You mean after trying to evict me? She gave a practiced laugh. Oh, let's not dwell on the past. We believe there's a way to make this situation beneficial for everyone. Funny, I said. That's what my lawyer said too. We sat on my porch overlooking the lake, and for the first time, someone from the HOA actually listened. Linda explained that the association was struggling. With the rent payments now going to me, their budget was in crisis. They couldn't maintain the walking trails or the clubhouse without raising dues, and the residents were furious. So, she said carefully, perhaps we can discuss a buyback. I leaned back in my chair. A buyback? Yes. The association would like to purchase your interest in the common property, to restore administrative harmony. I raised an eyebrow. What's the offer? She smiled professionally. We're prepared to compensate you fairly, twice your original annual rent share. I tried not to laugh. Linda, I said, your rent payment's already tripled. You're offering me less than what you're paying now. Her smile faltered slightly. It's what the board can afford. I took a sip of my coffee. Tell you what, I'll think about it, but I'm not signing anything without my lawyer. She hesitated. Of course. When she left, I called Dana. They're panicking, Dana said, and now they're fishing. Don't bite. You're in the driver's seat. I'm not trying to make enemies, I said. You're not, she replied. You're just getting paid for being right. But if they're that desperate, we can use this. Use it how? She smiled that legal devil smile I'd learned to fear. What if, instead of you being a co-owner, you became the landlord? The idea sounded insane at first. But here's how it worked. If I created a small holding company, basically a limited liability business to manage Miller Lakeside Holdings, I could legally lease my share of the common property back to the HOA for an indefinite term. That meant they'd no longer pay me rent. They'd pay commercial lease fees. And because leases could be renewed annually with adjustments for inflation, they'd effectively be paying me forever. Dana filed the paperwork. 2 weeks later, Miller Lakeside Holdings LLC officially existed. When I told Linda, she looked like she was trying to decide whether to faint or applaud. So, she said carefully, you're a corporation now? Technically, yes. And this corporation owns part of our land? That's correct. She took a long breath. Mr. Miller, please, I said, call me landlord. She didn't laugh. The next few months were surreal. Every HOA meeting now included an operations report, where they had to publicly acknowledge payments to Miller Lakeside Holdings. They called it land use continuity fees. Neighbors I'd barely met before started stopping by, shaking my hand like I was some kind of folk hero. One guy even said, "You're the reason our dues didn't go up to $500 last month. The board's too scared to push anything without your sign-off." I shrugged modestly, but inside I was cackling. Dana called it quiet justice. Sometimes, she said, you don't win by fighting harder. You win by letting them fight themselves. One rainy Thursday, I was sitting in the Marina Cafe when Linda walked in. She saw me, hesitated, then approached. Mr. Miller. Ms. Carver. She sat down opposite me. You've made your point. The board has no issue with your arrangement anymore, but the residents are restless. They feel the association's reputation has been damaged. I nodded slowly. Understandable. So, she continued carefully, we'd like to propose something else. She slid a folder across the table. Inside was a draft agreement. Lakeside Estates is willing to designate you as a formal consultant, a non-voting advisor to the board. In exchange, you'll receive continued lease payments plus a small stipend. You'd be, in effect, part of the HOA leadership. I stared at her, trying to decide if this was another trick. You want me to join the board? Advisory role, she corrected, to ensure we avoid future misunderstandings. I grinned. You want the guy you tried to evict to be your consultant? She smiled thinly. You're uniquely qualified. Dana nearly cried laughing when I told her. They're paying you rent and now they want to hire you? This is beyond poetic. It's symphonic. I wasn't sure whether to feel triumphant or exhausted, but there was one thing I knew for sure. I'd outlasted them. The HOA had tried to erase me from their community. Now they couldn't run it without me. 6 months later, if you had told me I had to be sitting in an HOA meeting, by choice, sipping complimentary coffee and reviewing landscaping budgets, I'd have laughed you off my dock. But there I was, nameplate and all. E. Miller, community advisor. The irony was delicious. The same people who once voted to push me off my property were now asking for my opinion on which flower beds looked more coastal. Linda had turned out to be surprisingly competent once the chaos cooled. She didn't pretend the board hadn't messed up. She faced it, fixed it, and even managed to get the residents back on her side. The only non-negotiable item? The lease payments. Every month, Miller Lakeside Holdings received its check, indexed for inflation, just like Dana wrote it. The HOA couldn't touch the lake, the marina, or the shared shoreline without my signature. It was no longer revenge. It was structure. And honestly, I was fine with that. The first real moment of peace came one breezy afternoon in July. The lake was glittering like liquid glass, the kind of perfect day that made people forget the politics and just live. I was on my porch when Linda stopped by again, this time in jeans and a t-shirt instead of the corporate armor. "Got a minute?" she asked. "Sure," I said, moving aside. "What's up?" She looked out at the lake, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "You know," she said, "for what it's worth, this all worked out better than I expected." "Better than I expected, too," I admitted. She smiled faintly. "The marina's thriving. Dues are stable, and the residents, well, they're calmer now. Having you involved actually made things less chaotic." "That's a first," I said with a chuckle. She looked at me for a moment. "You could have ruined us. Completely. But you didn't." I shrugged. I wasn't trying to ruin anyone, just didn't want to be pushed off my land. "I know." She paused. "For what it's worth. Thank you." It was strange. After everything, I almost respected her. The HOA had gone from being a petty bureaucracy to something almost functional, and I'd somehow become its weird, unofficial guardian. People stopped by my dock all the time now, to fish, to talk, to ask advice about property stuff. Half of them brought cookies or beer as a thank you for keeping the HOA in check. I'd become that guy, the local legend who turned a 72-hour eviction notice into a steady income stream. Dana loved it. She said I should write a book, How to Own Your HOA Without Trying. I told her she should write it. She was the mastermind behind it all. But she said, "Nah, you were the one who didn't blink." That's the part people forget. Most folks fold when a letter looks official. You read the fine print. Maybe that was it. Maybe the real victory wasn't to the rent or the title. It was realizing that paper power only works if you let it. The next board meeting was the one that truly closed the circle. It was held at the Marina Clubhouse, the same place Richard once strutted around barking about violations. Only now his chair was empty. Linda called the meeting to order. "Before we begin," she said, glancing my way, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize someone who's changed how we operate here." She gestured toward me. "This community," she continued, "went through a difficult time, but we came out stronger because one homeowner refused to be intimidated and reminded us that property rights go both ways." The members clapped, some even cheered. I stood awkwardly, waving a little. "Thanks," I said. "I just read the fine print." That got a laugh. Afterward, a few residents came up to shake my hand. One older man said, "Son, you made them play by their own rules. That's rare these days." Another whispered, "You're a legend on the local Facebook group." I laughed. That's either a compliment or a warning. That night, I walked down to the dock alone. The air was cool, the water perfectly still, the lights from the marina dancing across the surface. It was peaceful, but not quiet. The kind of alive peace that comes after a storm. I thought about my grandfather, the man who'd bought this patch of dirt before it was worth anything. I could almost hear his voice saying, "Never sell what's yours just because someone else suddenly wants it." The HOA had tried to erase that legacy. Now they were paying for the privilege of keeping it alive. Dana called the next morning. "So, you happy, Mr. Landlord?" I laughed. "Let's just say the coffee tastes better when the HOA buys it." She chuckled. "And what will you do next, now that you're practically the mayor of the lake?" "Same as always," I said. "Fish a little. Read the mail carefully." She laughed again. "Fair enough. Just promise me one thing." What's that? If they ever try something new, I grinned. I'll let them write the first draft. The funny thing? They never did. The HOA meetings stayed civil. Dues stayed low. The newsletter became almost wholesome. They even started an annual Lakeside Appreciation Day barbecue, and of course they held it on my dock. Every time I'd see the sign, event hosted by courtesy of Miller Lakeside Holdings, I'd shake my head and smile. 72 hours to sell, that's what they gave me. Now, they were renting their peace from me forever. And every time a check cleared, every time someone thanked me for fixing the HOA, I'd remember the one simple truth that started it all. Sometimes, the deed doesn't just prove ownership. Sometimes, it writes your legacy. The end.